Ever since I can remember, I've lived in color. Not the kind you see on TV or in magazines, the kind that spills from my sketchbook at midnight, the kind that drags me out of the gray spaces my parents seem to care about. My name is Lily, and I draw. I've drawn through lonely nights, through arguments I barely understand, through the quiet judgments that follow me like shadows. My sister, Emma, she's everything my parents wanted me to be. Gold medals, trophies, perfect report cards, varsity letters pinned neatly on the wall, Instagram posts showcasing her latest victories. Every family gathering is an exhibition of her success. And I'm the background noise, the hobbyist, the girl whose paintings are cute but never important enough to hang. I used to tell myself it was fine. They don't get it, I'd whisper to the blank page, but I do. My drawings and sketches, the ones I poured hours of thought and soul into, they weren't for them. They were for me. But still, it hurts. There's a knot in my chest when I see Emma's newest certificate glued to the living room shelf. Her smile, radiant and effortless, shining under the warm spotlight of my parents' pride. And me? I'm left with my brushes and my sketchbook, alone in my room, hoping my colors will speak louder than their words. I've learned to stay quiet, to let my art exist in the shadows while the world applauds someone else. But sometimes, late at night, I sneak to the window, looking at the quiet streets outside, and I imagine a world where they notice me, where they see me not as a hobbyist, not as the girl behind the scenes, but as someone who matters too. That's my escape, my little rebellion, my world of color in a house that's never really been mine. My room has always been my sanctuary. The walls are crowded with canvases leaning against one another, stacked in precarious towers. Sketchbooks filled with smudged graphite edges sit on the desk, paints dried in patterns that only I understand. Each brushstroke, each sketch, is a whisper of who I am, something no one else has ever cared to hear. It's strange, feeling safe here, protected by color, texture, the familiar scent of turpentine and old paper. I can disappear into my own world, and for a few hours, the world outside, the endless stream of Emma's awards, my parents' proud glances for her, fades into white noise. I pull out an old painting, edges curling, colors fading from the years. It's of my grandmother, Nana, sitting by the window, light spilling over her silver hair. I must have been 10 when I painted it. I remember the day she passed, the way her laugh lingered in the hallway long after she was gone, the quiet I felt in her absence. That memory, the ache, the longing, the grief, found a home in that painting. I spent hours trying to capture it, the warmth, the hollowness, the part of me that felt invisible even then. Flipping through my portfolio, I notice a pattern. Every piece is a fragment of my life, a fragment of pain and hope that never seemed to matter to anyone else. My parents never asked, never said, "Lily, tell me about your painting." They just asked, "When are you going to do something real?" Real, meaning awards, recognition, trophies. That's when it hit me, like a subtle, cold revelation. All those nights I thought they were just busy, distracted, proud of Emma. They had never really noticed me. Not my thoughts, not my feelings, not the little victories that weren't on paper or on a shelf. They didn't see the hours I spent with my paintbrush as dedication. They didn't see me at all. I set the brush down, staring at the canvas of Nana's smile. For the first time, the sanctuary feels fragile. The colors are comforting, yes, but they also remind me of what I've been craving: acknowledgement, care, validation from the people who were supposed to give it unconditionally. And now I know. If they'll never care, I'll have to make someone else notice. Someone who can see the stories hidden in my lines, the grief, the hope, the rebellion behind every hue. The moment I stepped through the front door, something felt off. The smell of polished wood, the faint scent of lavender from Mom's diffuser. It wasn't welcoming. It was sterile. Clean. Too clean. I dropped my backpack in the hallway and padded down the familiar creaky stairs to my room. And then I saw it. The canvases were gone. Every single one of them. The desk was wiped spotless, the sketchbooks stacked neatly, all my paints shoved into drawers. In their place, gleaming shelves displayed Emma's trophies, medals, certificates, rows and rows of them, polished to a shine. The room didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a museum dedicated to someone else. My heart stopped. My throat tightened. My legs felt like they might give way. I remember standing there, frozen, staring at the shelves, trying to reconcile the years of blood, sweat, and paint with what I was seeing now. "Lily," my mom said casually from the doorway, sipping her tea as if she were describing the weather. "We just thought it was time to showcase what really matters." I blinked. What about my paintings?" She looked at me, neutral. "Oh, don't worry. They're on your phone, right?" I couldn't even respond. My dad didn't look up from the newspaper he was reading in the living room. He didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't hesitate. He simply existed in his corner of the house, as if the removal of my life's work was a matter of zero importance. And then Emma walked past me, a small, almost smug smile tugging at her lips, like she'd just witnessed justice being served. My own sister, my blood, looked at me as if I'd been asking for too much attention all along. It took everything in me not to scream, not to throw the trophies off the shelves, not to rip the carpet apart with my hands. The anger rose hot, bitter, nearly choking me, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to breathe. Later, in my room, after I slammed the door and sank onto the floor, I remembered something I'd overheard just that morning while Emma was chatting with her friend online. Her voice had been casual, almost confident. "Mom and Dad think Lily's been too pampered. She needs to learn what it's like to have pressure. She's lucky we push her. Some people just don't have enough drive otherwise." I could almost hear the click of the camera in her mind, capturing my frustration as some lesson. In Emma's eyes, this was discipline, a course correction. She thought I needed pressure, needed to be humbled, and somehow that made it worse. Because now it wasn't just about being overlooked, it was deliberate, calculated. They had made room for Emma by erasing me. Not out of negligence, not out of distraction. They had made a choice. Sitting there, surrounded by the absence of my own world, I realized something crucial. I could not depend on them to understand. They never had, and maybe they never would. The sanctuary I'd built in colors and canvases was fragile in the real world. But the real world outside this house? Maybe it was ready to see me differently. And for the first time, a spark of something fierce ignited inside me. If they wouldn't celebrate my work, if Emma would claim justice where none was needed, then I would find a place where my art mattered, where someone, anyone, would see me, not my sister, not my parents. Me. That night, after the house had gone silent and Emma's laughter had faded into the background of my mind, I made a decision. I didn't need them. Not their approval, not their trophies, not even their attention. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through local art galleries, online exhibitions, competitions. I treated it like a scavenger hunt. Every link, every email address, Every submission guideline felt like a map leading me out of the shadow they had cast over my life. The first task was simple: reclaim my work. I dug through the phone photos I'd snapped of my paintings months ago, painstakingly cropping and adjusting each image to make sure the colors popped as they did on canvas. My sketches, the abstract experiments, the tiny landscapes I'd poured hours into, all resurrected digitally. I assembled them into a portfolio, my own curated collection, my own statement of existence. For the first time in years, I felt something flicker inside me, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since childhood: hope, and along with it, a tiny rush of rebellion. Every stroke, every hue, every imperfect line I captured in my portfolio was a quiet act of defiance. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post online yet. I just worked, late into the night, my headphones blocking out the world, my fingers tracing colors on the screen. Each piece became a little battle, each submission formed a little victory before the real victory even began. And somewhere in that quiet, my anger didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like fuel. Not to burn my family down, but to lift myself up. If they wouldn't celebrate me, I would celebrate me. If Emma's trophies could occupy the physical space of my paintings, then the digital world could hold my fire. By the time I closed my laptop, exhausted but alive with purpose, I knew one thing: this was just the beginning. The spark had ignited. The storm in my studio had passed, but its aftermath was fertile ground. And from that ground, I would grow, whether they watched or not. I held her gently in my arms, feeling the warmth of the sun spill over us like a golden halo. The blanket beneath us was frayed and faded, nothing like the perfect setups Lacey always insisted on, but that didn't matter. Here, on this little patch of grass in the backyard, everything felt real. She laughed, the sound pure and unfiltered, curls catching the light with every tilt of her head. I laughed too, a sound I hadn't allowed myself in years, because finally, I could see it. This little girl, my daughter, was all the perfection I needed. I adjusted her slightly, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and clicked the camera. 1, 2, 3 shots, each capturing not just her smile, but the quiet love and the rhythm of our lives that no trophy, no certificate could ever measure. And in that moment, holding her against the sunlight, I realized something profound. This was my real family. Not the carefully polished images Lacey's parents showed off on social media, not the walls lined with medals. Just us. Just the laughter, the warmth, the heartbeat of our bond. I whispered the words beneath my breath as I reviewed the shots. This is my real family. 5 simple words, carrying more truth than any of the accolades that had been shoved onto display in the past. For the first time in a long time, I felt the kind of power that doesn't come from control or recognition. It comes from presence, from knowing that love and joy live entirely on my terms. And in that sunlight, with her in my arms, I finally knew what it meant to be truly proud. It was barely 7 a.m. when we stepped out for our usual morning walk. I was sipping my coffee, still half asleep, when a massive flash of color hit the corner of my eye. My cup slipped from my hand, the liquid spilling onto the sidewalk. What is that?" my wife whispered, frozen, her hand tightening around her purse strap. There it was, 20 feet tall, staring down at us like a silent judge, a billboard featuring Emily's artwork. Each piece we had dismissed, every painting shoved into a forgotten corner, now displayed in bold, vibrant clarity. Underneath, words scrawled like a signature of rebellion. "This is my story. Remember me." Lacey's face drained of color. Mom, Dad, it's not what it looks like, she stammered, but even she seemed to hear the hollow echo of her own excuses. No one in the small crowd gathered on the sidewalk paid her a second glance. Phones were raised, cameras flashing, people stopping mid-conversation to gawk at the enormous display. I felt a strange mix of disbelief and panic. The neighbors, people who had always nodded politely at our perfect family facade, now stared at us, silently judging. My wife clutched my arm, speechless, and I could barely form a sentence. How could this happen without our knowledge? The billboard didn't just showcase art. It exposed years of ignoring, belittling, and erasing Emily's voice. The public, unwittingly, became witnesses to the very pressure and neglect we had long imposed in private. And as the morning light glinted off the bold colors, I realized we were powerless, completely, undeniably powerless, against the truth now displayed for the world. By the time we got home, my phone was buzzing like crazy. Notifications piled up, too many to count. I swiped through and saw it. Screenshots of the billboard, shared across Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, trending in our local community first, then picked up by national accounts. "Mom, look," Lacey whispered, pointing at the messages. Her voice carried awe instead of defiance for the first time. The texts came in waves. Mothers who had struggled to get their daughters' voices heard. Daughters estranged from families that never understood them. Strangers who simply felt seen by Emily's courage. Some wrote long paragraphs about their own neglected passions. Some just a quick, "Thank you for sharing your truth." I stared at the screen, tears welling up. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about a community of women who had been quietly silenced for years. The empathy, encouragement, and validation were overwhelming. People weren't shaming us. They were connecting with the story, with the pain that had been hidden behind our perfectly polished family image. In that moment, I realized the power of a single voice. Our private struggle, once confined to the four walls of our home, had grown into a conversation that touched hundreds, maybe thousands. And with that, the weight of secrecy lifted slightly, replaced by a strange warmth, a sense that we were no longer alone. The phone rang just as I was scrolling through the endless messages from the billboard. It was Grandma. I hesitated, unsure what to say. Our calls were usually short, polite exchanges. But today, there was something different in her tone. "Darling," she began, her voice trembling slightly. I saw Emily's billboard. I watched the clip online. I had no idea." I could hear her eyes welling up. "You've grown into your own person," she continued. "I've always worried, watching you live in that shadow, but you don't need anyone else's permission to shine." I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty counter, the weight of years pressing down. Tears blurred my vision. My own daughter, our Emily, was finally seen, fully recognized, and validated, not just by strangers, but by someone who had loved her unconditionally all along. "I'm proud of her. I'm proud of you too," Grandma whispered. "You didn't just raise her. You let her become herself." The words sank in slowly. I felt the emptiness I'd carried, the quiet ache of a household where achievements were measured in trophies and grades, start to fill. A warmth spread through me, soft and steady, as if a missing piece of our family had quietly slipped back into place. In that moment, I realized something profound. Love doesn't always need approval or applause. Sometimes, simply being acknowledged by someone who understands is enough to heal years of silence. The morning air was crisp, but there was an unease that didn't belong to the weather. Our usually quiet neighborhood had turned into whispers and sideways glances. Families who once waved politely now crossed the street, their smiles strained. The perfect family image that my husband and Lacey had curated so carefully was unraveling quietly, like threads pulled from an old tapestry. Lacey tried her usual charm, laughing too brightly, spinning excuses about the billboard, the social media attention, how it had all been a misunderstanding. But no one listened. The neighbors, friends, even distant relatives seemed to see through it, silently judging, shaking their heads. One afternoon, my husband and Lacey showed up at the doorstep, faces tight with a mix of guilt and panic. They wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow reclaim the control they thought they had. I held Emily close, and my eyes met theirs. "If no one else had seen this," I asked softly, "would you have ever come to us? Would you have ever cared?" They froze. No rehearsed words, no rehearsed smiles, just silence. The weight of that question, simple but piercing, reflected back everything they had tried to hide, the years of ignoring, dismissing, and controlling. It wasn't a public spectacle of screaming or confrontation. The justice was quiet, deliberate, absolute. Their collapse wasn't in shouts or fights. It was in recognition. Silent, undeniable, mirrored in our calm eyes and the community that had quietly watched, witnessed, and judged. And in that silence, I realized that sometimes the loudest truth is the one left unspoken. Months passed since the billboard stirred the neighborhood. The public shock had softened into quiet conversations, shared stories, and newfound awareness. But for me, the work had only just begun. I realized that the real healing didn't come from revenge or exposure. It came from giving others the space to be seen. I founded the Full Frame Project, an initiative for estranged mothers and daughters, and women who had been marginalized or silenced within their families. It was simple: a place to share, a space to be acknowledged, a way to tell your story without judgment. Stories poured in, hundreds of messages, photos, letters, all speaking the same truth. People just wanted to be seen. Ban Goai, ever the quiet supporter, contributed anonymously at first. But she soon joined in person, smiling with tears in her eyes as we prepared our first collaborative shoot. That morning, under gentle sunlight, Emily giggled while Ban Goai adjusted her tiny sweater, and I held them both close. For the first time, we were truly together. No one cropped out, no achievements compared, no silent judgments. I whispered to Emily, "Healing doesn't need a perfect frame, just the freedom to be seen." The camera clicked, but the real picture was in the warmth around us, the laughter, and the love that finally had space to breathe. The project went viral, not because of scandal, but because it resonated. Communities shared, supported, and celebrated. Messages came from mothers across the country, daughters reconnecting with parents, estranged families finding small paths toward understanding. And as I watched Emily run across the grass, Ban Goai chasing after her with a wide smile, I felt the peace I had longed for, a closure that wasn't loud or dramatic, but real, full, true, and finally seen.